And we want to open it up to the group for questions. We've had a couple come through. And remember, this is two-pronged. We want your questions to our presenters and then also your requests of our presenters. The question that Scott posed, what are you looking for from building performance specialists to aid in your work as architects? And I think Kristen started us off. We can start with the question that she posed. She said, architects don't typically think in Excel spreadsheets. How can building performance specialists share information in a way that's more graphic or legible to architects? Any thinking on that from your experience?
I'll throw something in. Yeah, we are totally guilty of that. And it's like two different languages. I don't think we need to speak in one language, though, one or the other, more graphic or more math. We need to speak in both, because it'll just be the architects that we're communicating to in a graphic way, where we have to speak to the mechanical engineers involved in the project in real math. So you got to do both. You got to be bilingual. I don't know, guys, do you have any other responses?
I totally agree, and especially we consultants, we have to be bilingual for sure, and maybe we have to have 3 languages, because then there is the client, and that's a total different language. I have been trained as an architect, and I remember when I started working as an engineer, the way my engineer colleagues were looking at a chart, it was completely different the way I was looking at a chart, and the other way around. And being a consultant, in reality, it's being somewhere in between. Yeah. But communication is essential, of course, especially in integrated design process.
So again, I think you have to deal with the language of the community that you're dealing with. In the residential world, even bringing that graphic chart is usually a non-starter. So drawing a diagram on a back of a piece of drywall is sometimes the best way to convey a basic concept and get them to get it. So being on site, learning good narrative kind of stories to tell, examples, metaphors that contractors get their arms around. And also with the mechanical, structural engineers, it's just drilling home that there's only a few places where I need your attention that's different from standard, and this is where they are. We're going to be having to pull this structure 6 inches away from this wall so we can get our air barrier and insulation behind it. And you'll get that drawing with it in the standard location. You're like, remember we had this conversation. It's got to move 6 inches away from that wall. It's, when you're dealing with big projects and mega data and 120, 300 drawing sets, it's very different, because in the residential world, you're dealing with, it's a different scale, and it's much more relational, right? It's much more conversation.
I think that's a great point, though, is that even in the Market Lands project, for instance, which is a larger residential, I think one of the most effective things that Tommaso and Transsolar did was to have little diagrams of what you're wearing at different temperatures. And it seems really basic, but I think that in some ways that clarified so many more points that any number of energy models and graphic tables, both for us as the architects and the rest of the design team, but particularly for the client. Oh, okay, that's what that means.
Yeah.
So John Keyes asked a really interesting question that builds off, I think, the sort of closing statements that Rachel and Tommaso had in their presentation, and really gets to the heart of our work together between architects and building performance specialists. And it's this idea of how we balance risk and innovation. And she says that she really likes this idea of the idea that innovation has risk, and note some similarities between the last project and the Manitoba Hydro project, which is also in Winnipeg that Transsolar worked on. And Tommaso, maybe you can comment on that more. But she asks, how can we mitigate risk, or is there a way to mitigate risk by looking at precedents, by work that's already been done? And how can we share information from buildings beyond just plans and sections and EUI and other marketing information to really understand lessons learned across those projects?
So this project is definitely influenced by Manitoba Hydro. So that's the way we started. On one hand, because the local identity was the same. So Manitoba Hydro is an office building, so it's a totally different animal. Although the basics is the same, you want to collect solar radiation. It's interesting though, because the project was influenced by that idea, which is, I don't know if it's Manitoba Hydro Place or the climate. I think it's the climate, but then evolved in a totally different animal because this is a residential, the client is different, the design team is different. And I remember that we had a moment where we had two concepts which were very close to one another, and the team had a very strong direction. We go with this direction, which was different than the other one, which was even closer to Manitoba Hydro. So in a way, there is this connection, but it's also that very different. In terms of how do we do risk management, I think precedents are great, although we really need to be careful about that, because when you are asked to, like, has this concept have never done, like for a social housing in Winnipeg with an 8-story high building, then you create this very little boundary of examples and you don't have precedents anymore. But think about it. If I am in a very similar climate, if it's 10-story instead of 8, if it's not a social housing, but it's a residential building, at the end of the day, the physics is the same. So we also need to kind of train the clients and saying, listen, this is what we have done in this case, and we think it's comparable to this case, and then will be a success. Otherwise, you might not have a precedent, because if you want to be innovative, maybe there is not a precedent which is 100% fitting with your building, and then it drawbacks in a way. It firebacks to your hypothesis and to your design process. And then, of course, I mean, you really need to have the right client to do innovation, because some clients, they don't want to do innovation, and then you rather drop it. And I want to be very straightforward on that. And the right design team, like we have for market land. I think the contractor needs to be on board, and we need to do education in a way, and to say this is what is going to happen, and also accept some limits of the concept. In market land, for example, we don't have a cooling, we don't have mechanical cooling, because that's the philosophy of the project. And you have to accept certain interior conditions which are comfortable, but not the comfort that you think as a stereotypical comfort, which is at 22 Celsius, which we have been talking for long, which is not even comfortable. So that is a bit the risk management, to bring examples which are fitting without being too demanding from a precedent which might not exist.
To build on what Tommaso said, one of the things that I've done surprisingly successfully here is I've had the client understand from the get-go some of the risks. And first, well, let me summarize it this way. Number one, first way to mitigate risk, don't make it your idea. Make it somebody else's. Make it the client's idea, where they come to you and you put enough ideas in their head that they go, you know what, we ought to do this. That happens through education. Then it's their idea. That's one thing I've cheated on. Second thing I've done is
Can you give us an example of that, Scott?
Oh God, I've done everything.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Sure. Everything from doing a vegetated roof where it really shouldn't have been, to pass the solar trom wall, to pursuing living building challenge. I mean, you talk about liability. When a client says, when you're going to a client and say, we're going to give you a living building challenge project, look at the stats. 1 out of 10 chances you're going to fail. But if they come to you and say, we want a living building challenge project because you made it their idea, and then you go, we'll try, but we can't give you a guarantee. You flip it on them, Bunny.
Yeah, I've had similar. In the Italian market passive house, the client who really loved to cook wanted a big Wolf gas range. There was no gas in this building. It was a warehouse. It had electrical, but no gas. So I said, well, it's going to cost this much, right? It's going to be a challenge for ventilation. It's going to, it's going to have all these things. Happy to give you this gas range, but it's a challenge. It has these downsides. And then I talked to her about induction, and she reluctantly went out to test out an induction range. She bought in. We got that out of there. So again, trying to tell them the pros and I always tell them my job is, to all the people, whether it's the contractor, right? I want to listen to your ideas too. And then we talk about pros and cons, right? You could do it that way, but then you're going to have this problem with the air barrier. You're going to have that problem with the this. It's going to complicate this detail over here. And then, oh, well, what is your idea? Well, we work back and forth. We come up with a solution. You try and get everyone's buy-in, right? So I think it's having these candid talks of pros and cons, assets and benefits, constraints and opportunities to figure out how you get everyone's, I call it combined intelligence, right? I need your combined intelligence. You know stuff about putting this together that I don't know. The math and the structural stuff. So let's get our combined intelligence together and solve this problem.
Okay, point two is having a hard conversation up front that there will be failure. Telling them that there's going to be some failure on the project. It may be this strategy, this material. We're doing things that have not been done before. We are making a prototype. This building has never been built under these conditions with these materials before. It's not an iPhone that's been made 100,000 times. So what I can guarantee them is there'll be some failure. And what I say to the clients is, I'll help you figure it out when there is. And I haven't been sued yet. And to be honest, I probably should have a couple times.
I think that's an excellent point, Scott, just to build on that, because recently we've been talking a lot about the notion of precedence, particularly with regards to market lands, but also other projects, and how so often what we as architects or as consultants should be looking for are precedents in terms of the process for finding solutions, not the project itself. And so knowing that these things will go wrong, knowing that there's risk in innovation, how can we all work together to find solutions to that? How can we plan to have that framework in place instead of just saying in such and such city, they built a building that's exactly the same square footage that has this temperature range. Well, how did they solve the problems in this building that arose after construction? And how can we imitate or expand on that process?
So mitigate risk through good conversation with all team members involved.
And I want to follow up to Scott, because I totally agree. I mean, communication is essential even there. And I remember we did a building in Stuttgart, which opened a couple of years ago with a facade which is tilted, and somehow, which was not even our fault, but it doesn't matter, was redirecting the light directly into a bakery at 3 p.m. in summer. And the owner of the bakery sued the client, the owner of the building, for that, who called us. But anyway, they started, they already sued them. It was too late. The client called us and we fixed that problem in 7 days. In 7 days, we applied a foil to the glass and we fixed the problem. So simply saying and being upfront and saying, listen, this is a building, it's not a car. If something goes wrong, we will fix it, because maybe something will go wrong because it's a big building. And Manitoba Hydro also, we had spent the first year in commissioning, in optimizing the building, the mechanical systems, because something went wrong at the beginning. And after the first year, everything was fine again. So that's also how, you manage risks.
If there's no other question out there, I want to link the risk question to something else I've seen change in the market since COVID.
Go for it.
Funny. Okay. Thank you. So we're talking a little bit about risk mitigation, and maybe in the last couple of months, I've had 4 projects in the office change from standard standard architecture to passive house, because all of these clients are trying to mitigate their risk for indoor air quality issues and transmission. And the passive house strategy is a great way to do it. So we had one elderly care facility decide to go passive house. We had one college in DDs. Yeah, it was in DDs, basically give us a commitment to now go passive. With that, the good news is we were designing it anyway to be a passive house. We just didn't tell them. So it was an easy lift. One other school and now one office. The school and the office are coming to us too late. And it's going to drive up costs probably too much. But we'll see. The point is mitigating risk right now in the COVID environment, go passive house.
Yeah. All right, we're going to change topics a little bit. Brian asked a question that really is about sort of business models and strategy. And he asked if any building performance specialists have engaged architects with an on-call type of arrangement, where you engage more project teams for shorter durations or more targeted studies.
Yeah, I'll jump in because I've done a bunch of that and some of my clients are on the call, so I better be careful. With some success and some failures. When we do something hourly, what we find is you guys don't call us because you don't want to spend the money and you wait too long. And then our ability to have success is challenged. So I think if you do an on-call, do it up front and you'll see value and you'll make the decision later on. Mitigating risk also, if you're going to do on-call, I'm going to ask you to limit the liability, because it's like doing architecture without having CA involvement. It's nuts. We've done it. Where I've done it successfully is where we've worked with a firm for 5 years, done multiple lead projects, and they got it. The firm got it. They totally changed their culture, and they're doing all their projects to at least the lead standard. It became their standard practice. And then we were able to like break up with them. It was like, you guys got it. You're good. Call us if there's an issue. And in that situation, they said, well, no. And I said, just hire us hourly, allocate $6,000 for us to do a QA/QC review and make sure you're on the right track. That firm stopped calling me 5 years ago because they've been that successful. So you can do hourly. Just, if you're going to do hourly, expect to spend money.
Yeah, and it really, go ahead.
No, I think it depends also on the kind of service that you offer at the end of the day. If we are talking of an integrated design process going hourly, probably doesn't fit. It's a contradiction of terms. Depends a bit which kind of service do you need in a way. But I also see, again, this learning curve with some clients we are working since 10, 15 years, like with the guys from Manitoba Hydro, KPMB, that was our first project and it was 2003. So it's already 17 years we worked together. Of course, now we are very efficient in working together. They understood how to relate to us, even if it's a big company. So it depends on who you're working with. So it becomes efficient, and then they use us in a better way. So the fee goes down because we know that we can support the same way in a more efficient way. But the hourly rates is a bit complicated for us. We actually now we have this model where we say we don't even tell you which kind of services we provide. Do we do a CFD? You don't care. Do we do a thermal study? You don't care. We are gonna achieve this. We wanna achieve this goal. We wanna achieve innovation. The tools we are gonna use, it's our business. So just to say, you don't even need to know in a way, and then we will translate this and help you with design. So that is a bit our model that we are following.
So on the residential or smaller, multifamily residential scale, we do hourly usually for initial site review to try and help that client pick the appropriate site, or if it's a renovation, help them find the building. And so that we can be in, like Scott said in his thing, at that initial stage where, real cogent decisions are being made that will have some long-term effect on opportunities and constraints. And we do that hourly. And then we have a fee for master planning. And then once we kind of know the scope of the project, then we have a fee for design services. And that has worked well. And we also always do what I call that values conversation, where we, with the client, we very clearly, again, try to get them to say what their values are. Right? They want carbon free, or, is it, what level of sustainability, and then telling them different things, and then have them list them, and then they rank them. And then we use that as a touchstone to go back during the design process when you get that scope, slippage, and remind them. But you said that this was more, number 2 on the list, and that was number 7. Do you really want to change that and move number 7 up? Or am I reminding you of what you said was important to you, right? You said health and indoor air quality was important. But now you got your eyes on this expensive, countertop or whatever it might be, right? Some bell and whistle, right? And remind them of that value priority list that they established.
So guys, we have 5 minutes left. Bunny, can we call on people to tell us, to answer that question I was asking before?
Sure. You gonna
So-
call on people individually by name?
If they don't, I guess what I'm saying is, guys, tell us what you need. Tell us what we can do better for you. And I'd just say unmute yourself and tell us, but rather than put it in the chat so we can have a conversation about it. But like, what helps you be more successful? And it can be anything from a conversation with your boss or a conversation with your staff. Or is it just some technical thing that we're missing? What can we do to help you be more successful? Quiet group, come on, guys.
I have a comment or thoughts on that. I think the biggest piece of that, when I think about it, and the biggest challenge is really educating the client. And I think that I think of almost like if there was a process that was put into place, or a series of, I don't know if it would be some sort of presentation to the client in order to communicate to them in those initial states in concept design, in programming, of what the value is, both long-term LCA value, and then also the value of indoor air quality, the value of systems integration. So I think really just that idea of educating ourselves on the different strategies, and B, how do we then educate the client in a way that gets them on board?
But I think that values conversation is a way to have a two-way conversation, that you're guiding the questions and giving some information along the way, but it's couched as getting them to answer those questions. So it's a combination of, instead of lecturing or over presenting, I think it's a way of going through those same categories of stuff and getting an interactive relationship going. Asking them, what do you think about, this? If they don't know about it, then you're prepared to give them some information about that in order for them to get it in their head that it's even something to consider. right? So our problem is that people don't even know what the options are in order to direct us. So it's a balancing act of communication. I think Scott's a master at it in directing the questions in order to elicit response and using that as opportunities to then inform them of that category so that they can make an intelligent decision.
So Jazz,
I think in a lot of ways what you're saying, Laura, it's almost like empowering the client with the information so that they can then choose what their priorities are.
Right. And making that an interactive thing rather than I'm going to, present and lecture to you on all this, great stuff. And some people go all, they're fuzzy-eyed and, bleary-eyed and they can't take all that in. So instead, it's like, we're going to find out what you need. And in doing that, I'm going to ask you some questions and you might not know enough about it. So then I will give you some information and some pros and cons in these different ways that you could approach that. And then you can respond to that. And that might not be a one-time conversation. They might need to go home and sort of, take in what you told them and come back with some answers in certain categories. In other categories, they're going to have some strong opinions, and that you're going to get that answer right there. So I think it's how you go about educating.
Anyone else? Well, if you have a couple more minutes, Jonathan asked the inverse of that question, which is what can we do for you? And I think that would be a great way to close the conversation tonight. I know, Scott, in your presentation, you gave us some of those and that really structured your presentation, but if there's anything you want to add.
A question for Jonathan. Is the question, what can Committee on the Environment do for this group? Or is it, can you clarify your question, John? You're still muted.
If I can find the mute button, I can clarify. Yes. Yeah. I was. I don't want to go into elaborate depth other than to say, what do you think? There's one thing to say that the role of consultants is, as you've said, to educate, to bring us along, to help us succeed, to raise the tides on all boats. But the question is, what should architects be doing better at? So my my argument here is, we can't forever say we don't understand what EUI is and we don't understand what different metrics are. But what do you all wish that your clients on the design side were better at, or that your dream, I guess your dream projects where you have design firms who are more integrated in, what do they bring that other firms don't, that you say more of us should be like, if that makes sense? Not and specifically in that relationship, not so much what coach should do.
I'm trying not to give you the stereotypical answer of collaborate, keep us, have dialogue with us so we can be more successful. If I don't know what your issues are, what your toughest challenges are, I cannot remove them. So it's just good communication to figure out what the problems are in the project to help it be more successful.
I maybe I have a stereotypical answer, I don't know, but I really believe in it, so I'm going to say it. What I would ask to an architect is, I don't really care if you understand what a UI is, but is to use whatever the UI or the understanding of it, or the need of shading or the need of orientation as a design opportunity. And many times I see as, we want to do this, and like the UI, whatever, we want to do this shading, and this is perceived as a constraint, a design constraint. It is not. And the moment architecture starts thinking about these performance inputs as an opportunity, then we will solve the issue.
I would agree. I think there's two things I find for developer projects in which there's, like we did a multifamily project and it died on the vine for two things. One, they picked a crazy site that was a brownfield and had a million costs and problems to it besides brownfield. But also they were in love with their spreadsheet, and even though they were getting pricing information and stuff from every single consultant that defied that their spreadsheet had the numbers in the wrong places and the wrong numbers, they couldn't let go of it. In the same way, lots of architects that I've worked with, they come with me and they have a design idea that at its get-go, it's like way too much glass on this facade, and they can't let go of how to creatively let go of some of that glass and still find a way to make this a beautiful facade, right? They're just so stuck on this much glass. And, so again, that same thing, we're seeing this as a creative opportunity, and that you said you really wanted to make this an energy efficient. There's no really way to do it with what you have drawn this first blush. And like anything else in the design process, when we get information, then we get creative, right? And isn't that what makes this an exciting field, right? Is getting creative. So I think that's the biggest thing, is keep an open mind and know that you're going to have some things challenged about the conventional way you've been approaching some aesthetic or some material process, whatever it is. You have to be willing to be challenged. We're in a new era and the world is rapidly changing climate, and we have to open up and get creative in new ways and be excited about that.
In closing, Jonathan, one of the things we need all architects to understand is how goddamn important this is. And I can't summarize it any way than that. We are fighting for other people's lives. And if everybody can't understand that, it's no longer about us, this generation, or even most of the people on this call. It's about your damn children and fighting for them. And we need all of us to understand that.
We start getting numbers, and I mean, we are already at the point where climate change made many more deaths than COVID, but nobody is talking about it because it's kind of hidden, but the numbers are much worse than that. So, but we will make it.
Scott, we have a lot of work to get our other colleagues on the page with us. We're still, like maybe 10% at best of the profession.
Yeah, I think we have to get our juices going with the challenge of design. I mean, I think we have to appeal to that competitive spirit of, the sexiest way to do this, right? And I think that if we can engage, particularly the younger generation, of great designers, they're gonna pull the old fogies along.
I want to build on that.
Sorry, we've started joking in the office that we need to be thinking about the post-COVID renaissance. And so I loved this point that you have these clients that are interested in doing passive house because of COVID. And so how can that really turn this constraint into just an incredible potential? I think that just rethinking that, we're at a point where everyone is thinking about, do I go to the office? Do I stay home? What does that mean? Do I open the windows while you're in school? And so how can we really channel that and use that to propel things forwards?
There's a huge opportunity with COVID for us to move everybody forward.
Yeah.
And so I can be very optimistic and just say, add more ginger. I can also be very dark and say that there will be generational attrition in our profession. And I've been criticized for saying that, but that will quickly change the industry because, as Laura said, the younger people give a shit. Beep, oops, we're recorded, sorry. Okay.
Well, and I think we've seen that through all the sessions that we've had to date, Scott. You know, I think we've had a very broad array of people engaged in this, but we've had so many young people from offices in Philly and around the nation who've really sort of come and gotten engaged in this. There's you know, an avarice for this, and hopeful that, you know, their passion for this is able to sort of blossom within the firms that they're working in.
Yeah, and the other thing that they can do is just do it without telling anybody.
Ask for forgiveness.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, it's that inertia when you say, oh, I got to throw out some of these standard details that we've had for a long time and rethink them. You know, there's that business decision, and it's got to be that point where you recognize that the world has changed, and this set of details is not going to be cost. It's not going to buy me my next client, right? I've got to, you know, get on this bandwagon. So, and it's time to shift them, get a new set of details.
Speaking about shifting them, I'm going to have to excuse myself, but I really got to get home to my kids.
Thank you so much. And thank you all.
Yep.
It's been a robust, wonderful conversation, a great start to the week, a really wonderful 2030 working group. And thank you so much to our presenters and for our participants who asked really, really great questions. Hope you all have a good night.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, David and Bunny, for organizing this.